Alright, what's up dudes? Welcome back to the channel. We have a knife review today. Pretty cool knife. This is the Cold Steel AD15 Lite. So let's jump right into it. This is the more affordable version of the Cold Steel AD15. Let me get that fingerprint off of there real quick. So there's a more expensive version of this. It's just called the Cold Steel AD15, and it is exactly the same in size and in the way that it operates. The only differences are the blade steel and the fact that this here is a Grivery type plastic instead of G10. As far as I know, aside from those details, this is exactly the same as an AD15. Now there is also a much more expensive version of this. It is the Andrew Demko custom AD15s. Now Andrew Demko is the designer of this knife, and he's also the patent holder of this interesting looking locking mechanism, which is called the Scorpion lock. So basically, Andrew Demko started making these AD15s. They were only available, they were only customs. And then apparently he got together with Cold Steel and decided to make a production run of the AD15s. And then a little bit later down the road, the AD15 Lites, so that us poor people can experience the Scorpion lock and the AD15, and without having to break the bank. So I like this knife. Full disclosure, I'm not usually a fan of Cold Steel's designs. Granted, I have not handled very many of them. But just aesthetically, I'm not really drawn to their designs in particularly. But this one I find very interesting and very, cool looking. This knife looks really unique. The blade is pretty standard, but this whole handle area and the lock, it looks really cool, and it's kind of, it's just a unique piece. If I saw somebody pull this out in front of me to open a package or whatever, and I had never seen it before, I would be very curious about it. I would want to know more. So I decided to pick me up a AD15 Lite to check it out. So let's look at some specs. This is a pretty big knife. We have a blade length of 3 3/4 inch and an overall length of 8 5/8 inch. So it's a big boy. Let's do some size comparisons right now while we're talking about the size. How about the Hogue Ballista 1, another fairly big knife. And the Manix 2, which also is a pretty big knife, and it is larger than both of those. I think this is, well, I don't think, I know that this is the largest folding knife in my collection. How about the Civivi Praxis? Another big boy. Still bigger than that. Let's do the Microtech UTX 85. And let's do the old rat one, the old dirty rat. And let's see, let's do one more. The Kaiser Deviant. So, just a random assortment of knives that some of you may have, so that you can reference, the size here. So we're looking at a blade steel of AUS 10A, which for some reason I had a negative perception of it in my head before I knew anything about it. which is stupid. You shouldn't make judgments on things that you don't know much about. But apparently this blade steel is much better than I thought it was. It is comparable to VG10 and 154CM, which 154CM happens to be one of my favorite kind of mid-range blade steels and blade steels in general. So this stuff is pretty good. For the price that you're paying, I think that's a reasonable blade steel to have on the knife. Let's talk about the Scorpion lock. So how it works is, you can see here as I open up the blade, there's a little bar here that is riding on the tang of the blade. It rides along the tang until it falls into this notch here in the open position. There's a spring back here, so it's providing tension, it's pushing this way into the tang. Very, very strong lock. And another thing I like about it is, as you're gripping the knife to do work, you are adding even more pressure to that lock bar with your grip. So it makes it even that much stronger as you're using the knife. I think it's a really cool lock, and it is one-handed use. So how you release the lock, at least how I do it, is I kind of I brace my thumb here and my middle finger here, and then I kind of stick my pointer finger in that crack there, and I pull back. It took a little bit of getting used to when I first got the knife, but now it's pretty second nature. It almost feels like a compression lock almost. On a compression lock, you kind of have to stick your finger back in it and push down. It kind of feels similar with this one. This knife is not very easy to flick open with your thumb, at least for me. I can do it, but I have to give it a little bit of wrist action with it. So for me, this is more of a slow roller as far as opening goes. But you can also pull back on that lock bar and kind of flick it out that way too, if you want. And it takes a little getting used to. But once you have it, I really like this lock. I can do it left-handed fairly easily. I kind of move my fingers in a different way than I do on my right hand for some reason. But I can still do it. So that's great. Yeah, it's a really cool lock. It's unique. It has, it's utilitarian, and it's very, very strong. I have no blade play at all, so very, very strong lockup. Another thing I find kind of interesting are there is external stop pins. You can see right there, and they don't engage on anything when the blade is open. You can see they're kind of just, they're sitting in there. They're not touching anything. But when you go to close the knife, they fall into this little area here, this little, I don't know, it's like their little home that they fall into. And that's what stops the blade when it closes. So that's kind of interesting. I guess it doesn't really need to have a stop pin in the open position because this basically is the stop pin here. And it's also the lock bar. So that's another kind of interesting little thing. This whole lock bar is made of aluminum, so that's great. And even though this is plastic here, basically plastic, it's a Grivery or an FRN, it doesn't feel too plasticky to me. Some FRN Grivery scales I have feel very cheap and plasticky, but these don't. I like the texturing on them. The only thing I don't like is that texturing is riding right underneath the pocket clip here, so in and out of the pocket, your seam is going to be rubbing on this, and it is going to tear up your pockets eventually. And you can feel your pocket rubbing on this as you pull it out of your pocket. So that's not the greatest, but it's not the worst either. Speaking of the pocket clip, it works just fine. Not deep carry. In fact, you're going to have a fair amount of the knife sticking out of your pocket, but that's all right. I usually prefer deep carry knives, or deep carry pocket clips, but in certain cases, I can't complain too much. Big old fat thumb studs, very aggressive jimping. I really don't like this type of jimping. It hurts my thumb, but it does go with the aesthetic of the knife, and for that reason, it doesn't bother me too much. It's a big old knife, and I think the jimping, aesthetically at least, it fits the knife. Functionally, however, not my favorite. It's a little too rough on the thumb. But whatever. What are you gonna do? Now we also have a pretty nice choke up position here, which, as you know, I love. So yeah, it's got enough space for your finger. I don't feel crammed in there at all. Feels really nice. And also back in the choked back, I guess you would say, position also feels great. Both spots, my hand rests right on that jimping, so that's all good. Let's see, what else? We have a nice broad blade, flat grind. They did a pretty good job on the edge bevels. It's very, very sharp. They seem even all the way down both sides. I like the blade shape. The tip is a little higher than I usually like, but it's not super high. You're not raising your wrist too far to get to the tip, so that's not too bad. I like the swedge. Let's see, we got a lanyard hole if you are into that type of thing. It goes right through the pocket clip there. So ergonomically, this knife is pretty good. Actually, yeah, pretty darn good. I don't feel the pocket clip poking me anywhere. The only negative in the ergonomic category is just that jimping. As I mentioned, we got a little bit of jimping back here. I don't think that does much. I think it's probably more just for looks. So that's the knife. I think that's a pretty good overview of the knife. I can't decide if I want to keep this in my collection. I bought it because I wanted to check out the Scorpion lock. I wanted to check out a Cold Steel, and I wanted a big work knife, a big knife for camping, maybe some light batoning here and there. But I don't know. This thing... Okay, I'll say this. The day that I got it, I did mess around with it quite a lot. Opening and closing it over and over again, kind of just getting the feel for the knife. And the next day, my fingertips were kind of rubbed raw. I think that is because, you need a pretty good amount of pressure on that thumb stud to get it to open. I think that's partly because you kind of have to brace yourself on this lock bar as you're opening, and you're putting pressure on that, and that makes it even harder to open. So it's kind of hard on my thumb. It's also hard on my pointer finger as I stick it in here to disengage the lock bar. Now there's different ways to do it. You can kind of pinch it here and pull back, and then use your finger to push down on the blade. Like I said, you can just use centrifugal force to get it out. So there's different ways to open it that might not hurt you as much. But I like to flick open my knives with the thumb stud. That's kind of how I like to do it, and I can't really do that with this knife. So that's one kind of drawback. The other is, if I want a hard use knife, I might as well just carry a fixed blade almost. This thing is big, it's fat, takes up a lot of room in the pocket. And I don't know, I almost just might as well get a fixed blade, I don't know. If I could afford it, if I had if I was more well off, I would definitely keep it just to have it in the collection. But being my finances being as they are, I'll probably just sell this, and yeah, I'll probably just sell it. You know, I think it's a good knife. It's a very good hard use knife, and I like it. It just has a few drawbacks, and I don't know if I can quite justify keeping it around. But that being said, it's a cool knife. I mean, this thing is pretty cool. Even if you're not really gonna use it hard, or you know, do any batoning or cutting down small trees, it's just cool to have around. You know, it's a cool locking mechanism. It's a cool knife. It's just cool. I like it. And that is that. Actually, before we go, let's compare it to another Demco, or Andrew Demco design, the AD20.5. These are the only two Andrew Demco designed knives that I own. But it's pretty interesting because you can see some similarities, especially in this forward finger choil area. They are very, very similar. And this like secondary groove area, you know, basically from the plunge grind back to here are pretty much identical on both knives. This one a little bit smaller. And then this kind of swooped area here on the back of the knife. What do you call the back of the knife? A butt? Yeah, I guess you'd call it a butt. On the butt of the knife, kind of similar. I mean, the AD20.5, in my opinion, is a much... it just makes a lot more sense for me as far as EDC and as far as pretty much in every way. You know, I honestly do not need a knife this big. I just don't. On a day-to-day basis, this is perfect. This size knife is perfect. That's all I need. So, with that being said, thanks everybody for watching and listening and being a part of the channel. I'm going to post a link to this down below. So if you want to go check it out on Amazon, go for it. I do earn a small amount of money if you use any of my links below to purchase anything. It's a small amount, but it does help the channel. So if you feel like buying something that I have a link for, go ahead and use my link for it. That helps me out. So with that being said, wow, I said that a couple times this review, didn't I? With that being said, I hate it when I use the same phrases over and over. It bugs me. Anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Adios.